want to welcome everyone to the Rhone Ranges virtual experience. We're so glad you could join us today. My name is Tony Coelho. I'm the general manager for Thatcher Winery here in Paso Robles, California, and also the president of the Rhone Ranges organization. Today, you'll be joining us for a virtual discussion on Syrah from all over the United States. Super excited about this discussion. I'd like to take this moment to introduce our moderator for today's discussion, Mira Honeycutt. Mira is the wine editor for Paso Robles magazine and has contributed to wine content in many other publications such as Napa Valley Register, St. Helena Star, Napa Wine Taste, Sommelier India, just to name a few. I've had the pleasure of running into Mira at numerous local events. She's a big fan of wine, but also, most importantly, she's a big fan of Rhone wines. Welcome, Mira.
Thank you. I agree with all you said. Thanks a lot. I was a Rhonist long before I came to Paso. Several visits to Châteauneuf-du-Pape and Côte-Rôtie, and so my experiences with French Rhone wines goes a long way back. But anyway, great to be in Paso. So as Tony said, I'm Mira Honeycutt, wine writer, coming straight from Rhone-centric Rhone zone, Paso Robles, and as we locals call it, Paso, right? And so today, the Rhone Ranges Zoom experience focusing on the most revered varieties of the Rhone Pantheon, Syrah. And this afternoon, we get to sample its multi-layered expressions from different appellations, Michigan, Oregon, and California Central Coast, which is exciting. I just took my first sip of my first Michigan wine, and it's Syrah. Brilliant. We'll talk about that. So let's meet our panel of winemakers. We have Jake Nivison and Amy Burke from Domaine, Berrien, Cellars in Lake Michigan Shore. Then we have Natalie Albertson, owner winemaker of Wildflower Winery in California's Ventura County. Kathy O'Leary, owner grower of Long Walk Vineyard in Oregon's Rogue Valley. And our very own local winemaker, Zachary Rains of Dubost Winery, Paso Robles, California. Sorry. So this afternoon, we'll take a deep dive into what I call sultry, seductive Syrah. A wine that starts with bold, dark fruit, rocking with black currant, black cherry, moves into bacon notes, and finishes with a light, peppery sensation. Yeah, Syrah picks up, you all know that, different expressions depending on the climatic conditions. It's juicier and full-bodied from warm climate and lesser, jammier, and with stricter tannins from cool climate. It's such a breadth, it has so much breadth, wideness, that it allows winemakers a freedom to craft their own signature styles, which is great. By the way, I think we all know its parents are two very obscure French varieties, right? Mondouse Blanche from the Savoie region and Du Raisin from Rhone Alps region. It's widely planted around the globe. Of course, its birthplace, the Rhone region, and it shines and rules in the northern region with wines of Côte-Rôtie, Hermitage, and Saint-Joseph. It's in Australia, it's Shiraz. In India also, by the way, it's Shiraz. Little known wine region of Nashik Valley is growing Shiraz. It's grown in South Africa, Chile, Washington State, and of course, along here in our Rhone zone, Paso Robles, Ballard Canyon, Santa Barbara County, and all along Central Coast. So we are going to begin with our Michigan winemakers, Jake and Amy, and they have their 2019 Domaine Berrien Cellars from Abigail's Vineyard in the Lake Michigan Shore AVA. So a little background on Jake, if I may. Michigan native and Rhone fanatic, is a Cal Poly graduate. Mm-hmm. And after a decade here on California's Central Coast, He moved to Southwest Michigan and began his agriculture research, developing low intervention winemaking, which landed him in Germany for a harvest. We want to hear about that. As an operating partner in the winery, he hopes to bring principles of organic and biodynamic farming to a young and blossoming wine region. Now, Amy is a native of Southwest Michigan and also a Rhoneist. She graduated from Marquette University with a degree in chemistry to pursue wine, but I believe you got burned out of the lab life, right? Then her wine career began at Domaine Berrien, where she worked for 5 years. Then she moved on to teach enology and cellar operation at Lake Michigan's College of Wine and Viticulture program. After 3 years of teaching, you returned to Domaine Berrien. So Jake and Amy, first tell us about the Lake Michigan Shore AVA. And then we want to hear about the interesting background of Domaine Berrien's property, which I believe once was a cherry orchard. And then we'll go into the wine. So let's hear about the Lake Michigan AVA. Very interested to hear about it.
Yeah, so a lot of people first hear about Michigan and their first thought is Michigan and wine, and those two concepts don't really run in tandem. A lot of people are surprised to hear that Michigan has wine in general, but throughout the state, we've got about 191 wineries. We've got about 6,000 acres planted and 5 separate AVAs. So we're located down in the southwest pocket of the state in the Lake Michigan Shore AVA. And so what you can't see in the picture is the entire state of Michigan surrounded by the Great Lakes. Where we lie is along the shore of Lake Michigan, which provides this large moderating effect on our climate. So all throughout the state, from the southernmost point where we're at, all the way up to that second Leelanau area, that 20 miles off the coast of Michigan, that whole way is very moderated by the lake. And so we call that almost like the fruit belt within our state. And so down in our county where we're at along Lake Michigan Shore is actually the second most agriculturally diverse county outside of the state of California, where we're growing peaches, cherries, plums, blueberries, strawberries, pretty much everything except for citrus, avocados, and most nuts. We have chestnuts, but that's a little bit different. Yeah. But for the most part, Lake Michigan is what goes and provides us such a moderating effect on the climate in what is otherwise a fairly cold region of the United States. So for USDA hardiness, we're zone 6B. But if you were to look at like the Winkler scale, we flirt right on the line of a zone 3, which is, right as the same as the Rhone itself. So us personally, we sit 6 miles off the coast of Lake Michigan, which in evenings like today are the reason that we're getting just pounded with snow right now, is because of that effect of the lake's moderating influence. As when it's colder in the air, the lake is warmer. We don't have to get into all of it, but the lake does wonderful things for us and allows us to grow and ripen various kinds of fruit. So within the Lake Michigan Shore AVA itself, our vineyard started off 20 plus years ago as an old cherry orchard. Due to some rising interest in wine grapes and wine growing, the original owners of the property went through, and his name was Tom Fricke. He was a Rhone fanatic. And Tom suddenly found himself no longer wanting to be in the cherry industry and found himself ripping out all the cherries as his hobby of growing wine or making wine grew and grew until he decided that the best means of going through and making wine was to grow his own grapes. And so that's what brought us to where we are today on our estate vineyard that sits in total of 80 acres, about 40 of it is wine grapes. And so on our area, we're growing about 18 different varieties. Wow. Some planted more than others, but Tom, being the Rhone fanatic that he was, he put out a bunch of different varieties. So we have a Marsanne, a Rouge, Viognier. I'm looking to put a little Grenache in the ground, but still being Michigan, the biggest thing that we fight in our area is not growing and ripening the fruit so much it is making it through the wintertime. And so every grape variety is a little more sensitive to cold than the others. And so on our property, unfortunately, Syrah tends to be our most sensitive grape to the cold, followed by Viognier. Third in line, I'd say, is probably Merlot. And when we say cold, there's a lot of acclimation that goes on within being in these colder regions. The vines tend to develop a sense of place. They know that, I mean, we're not going from vast extremes overnight, we're slowly stepping into them. But out here, you know, right now we're at 31 degrees and we'll slowly step down into the teens throughout the season. But I mean, before I go too far into one direction or another, I don't know, I should probably take a step back and talk a little bit more about Syrah itself on our farm.
Yeah, tell us your 2019.
Yeah,
so 2019 was actually kind of a unique year. So I'm sure you guys may have heard the term polar vortex. It's something that we in the northern chunk of the country have to deal with. It is a large front of cold air that moves down from the polar regions and brings us down. Typically in the winters, we very rarely fall below zero for an extended period of time. We may be like -2 for a couple hours at 2 a.m. But when a polar vortex comes in, that pushes us into the negatives much more. And 2019 was a polar vortex year. The coldest it got on the farm that year was -12, which is enough to cause crop damage, unfortunately. We do have mitigating factors. We do bury canes in the snow. Thankfully, the lake gives us lots of snow and allows us to insulate at least some of our canes. So we had a much smaller crop that year. We typically run about 4 tons per acre when it comes to cropping on the Syrah. And that year, I believe, just check my note real quick, we pulled 1.2 tons per acre off. So much more reduced crop. But on the flip side, that does allow for us to have a more even ripening coming across the fruit. Yes, we're only running minimum crop load because what survived is what we have on the plant, but viticulturally, it allows us to get a little bit better ripening out what could be oh no, we're not getting anything year. We harvested it on October 20th. It came in at 20.8 bricks. Beauty of working in Michigan is chaptalization is legal. So we do chaptalize up to 22.4 is usually our goal when we're coming out to making reds. pH at harvest was 3.38. So very high acid. The titratable acidity was 7.2 grams per liter and on the finished wine. So when you're looking at the wine, it tends to run a little bit more lean when it comes to the acids. In Michigan, we are a acid and therefore food friendly wine making style. We're like, these wines are great, but make sure you have something to eat with them because the acids are so bright and heavy. Otherwise it can overpower the notes. I don't know if you want to talk more about it.
Yeah, I mean, outside of that, we're not doing anything too crazy within the cellar. We do everything. We hand harvest everything. We go in, we do strictly punch downs on it. We don't hit anything with very heavy oak. We like to try and showcase a lot more of the fruit on it. And so I think because of our low yield in that year, we didn't use, I think no more than 30% new French. On that, we really only hit it with like a medium long toast on the barrels. Outside of that, you know, it's nothing too incredibly, you know, different in the world of winemaking. No frills, no thrills. Spends about a year in the barrel. Low alcohol, I guess, is the main thing that we really push for here.
Like 12.5, I think I saw somewhere. Or was it Natalie's 12.5? One of them was.
So this year, the 2019 came in at 12%, actually. So we tend to run a little bit lower alcohol.
12.0, yeah.
Yep.
Right.
So with the lower alcohol, and that just comes with, you can only do, as we call it, so much bagged sunshine in Michigan. You can only add so much sugar for chaptalization. And we'd rather not push it. We'd rather the fruit show properly. We're not an overly manipulative wine making styles. We add yeast. The yeast on this vintage was B254, just standard, really good, solid red Rhone yeast. And we did 17 days on the skins for maceration as well. With having the shorter maceration time helps us reduce the amount of bitter tannins that we are pulling, because I have found in making wines in Michigan, overly long macerations, you pull a lot of very tight seed tannin, which is really great if you can let it sit for 5 years. We don't always have that luxury, especially in a year where we're only yielding 48 cases of a particular wine.
It's a really small production. 48 cases, right?
We are all estate and we refuse to be anything but, good years and bad.
So what the farm gives us is what we work with.
So what is your total annual production? All the varieties, all the labels?
We float around 3,500 or 3,500 cases.
3,500 to 4,000 cases a year, depending. It really, being an all estate winery, it really does depend on if Mother Nature behaves for us that winter. We do sell grapes to other wineries in the years we do have surplus, though.
So tell us about the elevation of the vineyards and the soil type.
So a lot of Lake Michigan shore AVA, Lake Michigan itself comes about because we were carved out by glaciers. That's what made our giant Great Lakes. So we have these incredibly sandy soils around us. I mean, we go through, we get 22 inches of rain plus in a season, and it just drains right away to the point where we can get, massive erosion. We don't sit that high above sea level, about 940 feet. So we're not incredibly steep. Where we're at right now, we are maybe 6 miles off of the lake. We are at the highest point within our county. And so that gives us drastic advantage in the springtime when we get these spring frosts. In the winter, when it gets cold, there's not much that we can do. In the spring, our frosts are a little bit more of an issue. And so sitting at the height that we're at, it really allows us to kind of dodge some of the climatic conditions that we face. But our nice sandy soils on our property, we have, I think, 5 distinct different soil types. All of them are going to be mostly sand-based, to the point where there's not much mitigation that goes in to our ground here. For me personally, if I don't have to do any kind of amendments to the soil, I stay away from it. There's been a lot of talk in recent years, and when people are putting wineries in and around us, there's a lot of irrigation going in. But when I left California, I was happy to leave irrigation behind. Never had to see another well go.
Well, we'll talk about that with Zachary. This is very interesting. I mean, much lighter in color, great acidity. I know the rest of you winemakers have this wine with you. No, you don't. Okay. Really, really just an eye-opener for me. A Michigan Syrah. But is absolutely beautiful. Beautiful fruit and great acidity. Thank you so much. We're going to move on to Natalie. Welcome, Natalie, of Wildflower, owner, winemaker, Wildflower Winery. And we have your 2020 Domani, which means mañana, tomorrow, right?
Yes.
And it's a sourced fruit from Curtis Estate in San Ynez Valley, which is Santa Barbara County. And a little bit about Natalie, a native Californian. Natalie's love for wine began surrounded by bold reds up the Central Coast and Temecula Valley. Got to talk about that sometime in Southern California. She and her husband moved to Sicily, where her whole world and palate expanded, I'm sure, as she lived on Mount Etna. That's very interesting. We want to hear about that too, and tasted the region's minerally wines. She earned her wine certification program from UC Davis and is currently making wines in Ventura County, sourcing fruit from Central Coast. So tell us what you told us earlier, the location of your new tasting room coming up. Where is it and when is it going to open?
Oh, that's a good question. Like I said, I just signed the lease about a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago. So it'll be in Ventura, the city, off the 101 near Telephone. So really excited. There's a couple of breweries there and other wineries. So it's going to be a great little destination. So yeah.
So when did you get into winemaking? What was your first vintage? And where did you produce, like Custom Crush in Ventura area?
Yeah, first vintage was 2020 at a custom crush.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, I had done the WSET tasting certifications, and I really enjoy making things from scratch myself. I do all the ferments, all the sourdoughs, the kefirs, the kombuchas, and all of cheese. And my husband does beer, so wanted to be on that side of it. So that's when I started the UC Davis winemaking program and decided to produce. So Syrah, of course, is just such a lovely staple, I feel like, for a wine library. So I wanted that to be one of the first ones that we make. So
So this is the first wine you made, this variety?
yes. Yeah. I made 5 wines that year. One was a pet nat, so you could argue that that was the first wine that we made, but yes, this was among them. Yeah.
And these are, you produce 60 cases?
Yes, 60 cases of Syrah. So yeah, we sourced from Curtis Vineyards in Santa Ynez. It's 12%. I had wanted to pick at 22.5 bricks, and they said it's going to be there. There were 3 different heat waves that summer. If you were in central coast of California, it was just like heat wave after heat wave. And so it's just kind of like a crapshoot. You have to pick when to pick. So the first 2 were in August, wasn't going to pick then. And then just waited it out and picked September 28th. Thought it was going to be around 22.5 bricks. It was at 20.2. So that's fine though, because we love those lighter, not have, I think that there's a time and a place for every kind of wine, but I wanted to make one that wasn't as heavy. So that's why I'm happy that it came out at 12%. 3.6 pH. 60 cases produced. We do all hand picking for everything. We destemmed 100%, and then I added back in about 40%. And I had a professor ask me like, oh, by weight? And I was like, no, it was about this much. It was about 40%. It was about this much. And she was like, oh God. But like I said, we measured with our hearts, and that's what we came up with. So
vinification program, are you using any kind of yeast or
no, I did native fermentation. Yeah. So punch downs twice a day. Been fermented, pressed it on October 10th. So about 13 days on the skins. I did a little bit less time. It was dry at that time, but I did a little bit less time because of that stem inclusion. They weren't 100% lignified. So that greenness, I think it's lovely and it adds to it. But I didn't want to, leave it on for a month on the skins. Separated free run and press, tasted both, blended them together, and it just seemed so much more balanced once we blended it together. So that's what we ended up doing at the end. Aged it half in old oak. So it was at least 7 years old, and then the rest was in stainless steel. So
it's got great freshness, great acidity.
Yeah. I'm really happy with it. I had produced a Viognier that same year, and so I thought of adding some in, and I kind of did a blending trial, and it just didn't. It's so floral on its own that I felt that the Viognier didn't add to it. I felt like it took away from the Syrah.
Mm-hmm. Are you sticking to making Rhones from Santa Barbara County, or?
I do some, yes. I do, Viognier, Syrah. I also do Grenache. I do Grenache many different ways. It's so versatile. Chardonnay, Pet Nat, and then I did an Albarino this last year, so that wasn't Rhone.
Where'd you get that from?
It was from River Bench Vineyards. Yeah,
Yeah, right.
Santa Maria Valley.
Right. So Domani, why? Why the name Domani?
Yeah, Domani means tomorrow in Italian. So when we lived there, it's kind of like if you've ever been to Hawaii, you're on island time. You know, you are at the mercy of everyone else or whatever. And it's just just have to chill. You have to relax and take it easy because your internet guy will come Domani, which means probably next Thursday, you know. It's Domani or Dopo Domani, you know, it'll get done. Don't worry, you know. So
That's India for you.
yeah,
I know that well.
it was so fitting because we had a bottling truck for bottling, and they were like, "Oh, it's going to be bottled on Tuesday." So I went, you know, thought, okay, it's going to be on Tuesday, and then no, it ended up being Wednesday, and I was like, figures.
Of course, yeah.
Of course.
Well, this is a delicious wine, and it's your first vintage here.
Yes, thank you. Yes.
Delicious. Thank you so much, and good luck with the tasting room.
Thank you.
And I wanted to share with everybody the lovely notes. If you can see the wildflowers, they're dried wildflowers from Natalie. What a delicious little note. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you, Mira.
Thank you. All right, we're going to move on to Kathy O'Leary and her 2020 Long Walk Vineyard Syrah from Rogue Valley. Originally from Northern California, Kathy and her husband, Tim, acquired Ashland's historic Valley View Orchard in 2000. And 2 years later, you transformed it into a certified organic farming property, adding vineyards. The property is also home to natural habitats such as birds, bats, and a community of bees. So we want to know a little bit about the Rogue Valley appellation, which I believe is just bursting now, right?
I think that's exactly right. And I feel like I need to invite Craig to participate here. Because Craig here, who's managing the slides, is also from the Rogue Valley and also has a certified organic property as well as biodynamic and regenerative. And it's a big focus in the area where we are. And I don't know to what extent that's because a lot of its ag history has been, with conventional orcharding and such, which lends itself to want to return a more natural environment to the whole area. But clearly we've all found success with using those kinds of techniques with this property. So the Rogue Valley is down at the bottom of the state. Our particular property, which is the red star, is only about 20 miles from the California border. So we share a lot of that same climate, and we share a lot of the same soil and history with the Cascade Mountains that run up and down the volcanoes that run up and down the central part of the state, as well as the Siskiyous, which is a different mountain range between us and the ocean. Ashland itself is a box canyon, and what you're looking at now is our Syrah vineyards, and then looking due south towards the town of Ashland and towards the box canyon that exists below us. It's all volcanic soil, and it very much mimics an ideal environment for Rhone varietals. Our site in general is a very steep site. We have a tremendous downdraft of cold air every night. We actually need no frost protection for any of our vineyards or our orchards. And all told, we have about 50 acres, including lots of orchard trees as well. We grow cherries, we grow apricots, we grow peaches, we grow some pears and some apples, in addition to our wine grapes. And we find that the mix of those allows a nice biodiverse habitat, and allows us to really focus on some of the things that we think bring the right character to our wine, as well as the right environment for a tasting house and a direct-to-consumer business We have, bat houses, we have, places for owls. We have acres and acres of pollinator garden. We have, more than 50 hives of bees. And that whole story is part of what makes us special. The Rhone varietals that we grow include Syrah, Grenache, Mourvedre, Cinsault, Carignan. And we also grow a little bit of Zin. In some ways, we grow some varieties that we just like to drink, and they weren't part of an overall plan together. But most of the Syrah that we grow is basically for blending with all of these other Rhone varietals. We produce a blend that includes them all. And then we produce a small amount of Syrah only that's primarily for our wine club. And that's what we're tasting now, is the Syrah that we make available to our wine club. We have a little bit available to the general public, but for the most part, it all goes within a few months of its release.
So do you do this every vintage, a varietal Syrah, or?
Yes, pretty much.
So you do like.
So we only produced about 50 cases of this.
Okay. Right.
And but we produce a lot more Syrah than that. And the Syrah goes into our blend that's called Field Notes for the most part.
Is that like a GSM blend?
Yeah, well, it's a GSM plus Carignan plus Cinsault. So a GSM plus.
GSM plus. Yeah, let's talk about this wine. It's got a beautiful color, deep color. And tell us your vinification program on this.
Well, the Syrah is perhaps one of the easiest things that we grow at Long Walk. The big issue we have in the growing process is that it's over vigorous, and we have spent a lot of effort trying to figure out exactly the right cultivation technique that will reduce its vigor. But literally, if left alone, you could come back a couple weeks later and need to machete both sides of it. It wants to grow right into the aisle, and it's very vigorous. Part of that is that it's very deep soil, very rich. It is an area where there's some clay and some old river behavior well underground, and I believe the Syrah has well found it. So we work hard at what the ground cover is. We work hard at what the in-row cultivation is to keep it within its bounds. The wine itself, or the grapes themselves, are we can pick them right at the chemistry that we're looking for. We haven't had problems with that, so we get it right at the sugar, right at the acid, et cetera, that we're looking for. This particular wine was a 377 in pH, and acidity was 6.1. And that is fairly typical of our area as well. We're a pretty high acid site. And then this it's basically, it's basically destemmed. We use not a native yeast on this particular vintage, but it will take off with native yeast as well. We were trying with this vintage to treat it a little bit differently and draw out some of the more nuanced flavors. And with that, we spent time, I guess you would say it, we're working through a different barrel program with this wine and trying some different things. So this wine was about 30% oak, and using a couple of different kinds of barrels that we then blended together. We were very happy with the result. And I think that in the future, we're actually asking ourselves whether we need to make more of this and make it more available to the public.
So right now it's club members.
No, we make it available to the public, but right now the amount that's available is quite low.
Quite low, okay.
Yeah, we didn't have a plan to have this available year round, for example.
Is there a lot of Syrah growing in Rogue Valley? And it's more Rhone driven than Pinot, right?
Yes, oh, absolutely. Because of the weather, because we're so much farther south than typical Pinot country, the Rhone varietals grow very, very well in our area. And there are a lot of wineries in our area that produce different Rhone varietals. Just like us, basically.
So how many wineries are there now in Rogue Valley? I'll tell you, I was there like 20 some years ago. There were maybe 5 or 6. I'm not kidding.
Right,
10,
right.
right?
You know, I want to say there are about, I want to say 60. Is that about right, Craig? Craig's on mute.
Oh, I'll mute myself here.
I want to say there's about
there's-
60.
Okay.
wineries in our
if you
area.
include Applegate and Illinois, I think it's about 120 now.
Yeah, but we don't want to include, no, I'm kidding. Craig's in the Applegate, so. No, I only base that based on how many are part of the Rogue Valley Vintners group, which for us is 40 to 60.
What is your total annual production? How much do you make?
It's about 1,200 cases, so quite small and all direct to consumer, with a very small exception that we make available for glass pours around the state.
Yeah, yeah. This is just the beautiful wine. I mean, it's been a while since I tasted an Oregon Syrah. I mean, Oregon's whatever wines we taste usually Pinot and Chardonnay, you know, most of it. So this is a beautiful representation of Rogue Valley.
Thank you. Thank you.
It's wonderful. I mean, whoever curated this collection together, it's great. You've got Michigan, you've got Santa Ynez Valley, and now Oregon. So it's just a beautiful representation.
Yeah, Syrah is not like the old days where it was all very, heavy and hot. It's it's much more nuanced these days, and in many ways grown in and treated in ways that are much with a lot more finesse.
With a lot more, I think, as I said, it has it cuts such a wide swath that winemakers can create, their signature style. And then, depending on cool climate and warm climate, I mean, all these different climates here, we've seen at least 3 cool climates. We're going to go to warm climate next.
There we go. That's right.
So, and you can see the colors, it's getting deeper as we go along, And what's the soil type, at least in your vineyard?
We are old volcanic soil, but it's a Manita loam is specifically the soil type. On a pretty steep slope.
Yeah. So steep meaning what's
40%.
Okay.
Yeah, we can still get a tractor in there. It's not steeper than that, but it does create, as I said, quite a great cold air flow off the property, and gives us that kind of temperature difference between day and night that makes all the difference when you're looking for a wine you want to drink.
Yes. Now I am losing something. Well, thank you so much. We are going to move on to Zachary now. And I think I have your notes here, the wine that you have brought. Oh, here. Okay. My good friend, Zachary. I'm losing here.
You're losing me. Uh-oh.
I'm losing you. No, I didn't lose you. I have your wine here. 2019 Dubost Syrah from the Steep and Rugged. Talk about steep and rugged.
Very steep and rugged.
Oh, it's next to Paper Street, and I've been there, and I know how rugged that is. I call it Middle Earth. Glenrose Vineyard in the Adelaide district on Paso's west side. Zachary has a very interesting background. He grew up in the vineyards of his parents, John and Kate, and I know his mother, Kate. She's a lovely lady. In the tiny York Mountain area, which is the smallest AVA here in the Paso Robles AVA, and Templeton, neighboring Paso Robles. And you cut your teeth working with legends like Kenny Volk at Wild Horse, and then you were with my good friend Terry Colton at Adelaide at the HMR Vineyard. Wow, you have, quite an interesting career. And in the past decade, Zachary has farmed the 20-some acres at Dubost, and you have received numerous awards and 90+ points for your wines. Last time when I was there was, some time back, you told me the most interesting story about Dubost Ranch. It is so fascinating. You have to share with us. It goes back to late 1880s. You have to tell us.
Sure. So Dubost Winery, are we ready now?
Yes, you're on.
Okay. So Dubost Winery stems back from the Dubost family, which I'm a member of through marriage, to 1882 when they settled in the Adelaide area west of Paso Robles. As the crow flies, we're about 14 miles to the Pacific Ocean, so we do get a great cooling influence from the coast for growing grapes. But as far as the family goes, they settled here from the Cherbourg region. They escaped the Franco-Prussian War. They were blacksmiths by trade. Here you're looking at photos from the Glenrose Vineyard. This is a terraced vineyard, very steep in elevation, about 1,800 feet at the very top, pure chalk. It's pretty famous in that Don Rose, the owner, went through with a tractor and basically exposed the limestone, did all the terracing to basically do away with any topsoil that was there, which was, as it started, very little. So as you can see here, I mean, it's a very rocky, calcareous site. This is a 99 clone, which is from the Boca style region. It produces wines that are very rich. And the site also helps to progress that because the site is extreme, and as well as the clone of Syrah is extreme as well. So yeah, just jumping back a little bit, the Dubost family settled here. We settled in 1882. Adelaide area is kind of a small little, it was a small little town back in those days that really survived off the mine that existed out here. The Dubost family went into business as retailers. They opened their own general store. They had a dance hall and a post office that they ran. They also started the Adelaide Rural Telephone Company right around the 30s or 40s, I believe that was, when one of the family members passed away on her honeymoon, and they didn't hear about it till 3 or 2 weeks down the line. So they thought, we got to do something, because it was really isolated out here. There wasn't a whole lot. And if you've ever been out here, it's a beautiful, beautiful country. We were nestled at the base of the Santa Lucia mountain range. And really, it's just a spectacular place. We've been here ever since. We started our winery in 2004. We started planting grapes in 2001. And we converted an old pole barn that we had into our straw bale winery in 2008, and then proceeded to construct a tasting room in 2015 and finished it in 2016, and here we are. So we have about 10 acres of grapes planted on the estate, as well as sourcing from other vineyards in the Paso Robles, generally the Adelaide sub-AVA of Paso. So we keep it really in the neighborhood, so to speak. So on the estate, we have predominantly Syrah planted. We love Syrah. I love Syrah. It's really been, a love mission of ours to grow Syrah, to blend Syrah in as many ways as we can. We do a varietal Syrah every year. It's been one of our biggest staples. And so, I farm all that. I'm the vineyard manager, do all the farming, do the winemaking, do the shipping, clean the toilets, scrub the floors, and everything else. So that's
I believe you.
That's my job here. So, so just a small family-run operation. We're about 1,500 cases annually, and we produce. I make 14 or so different wines per year. Ranging from 50 cases in production to 400 cases in production.
And you do some obscure varieties like Cab Pfeffer, Negrette. I've tasted some bizarre, wonderful wines.
Yes. We like to experiment. I do Cab Pfeffer, Negrette. Touriga is now, Touriga Nacional is a varietal that I'm producing and making into a dry red wine. So Carmenere is another one. So yeah, we've kind of ventured off. I love to just, I've never met a grape that I didn't want to make into a wine. So that's kind of where we stand. And as the SKU count gets higher and higher, we'll see where that lands us in the future. But yeah, it's, some of these varietals that have popped up over the years, I couldn't resist in making. But generally, we're a Rhone and Spanish house. We do Tempranillo. Syrah is our biggest product for sure. We have 4 acres planted, and then we source another 6 acres as well from neighboring vineyards. So that's really what we focus on. Besides that, I do a lot of Rhone white wines, but Syrah is definitely the highlight of the portfolio.
This has such depth and complexity. So is it the steep terrain?
I think it's a combination of both winemaking and site. I think the site is an extreme site by any means. If anyone is ever to see Glenrose, you saw the pictures earlier. It's very steep, very tight. There's like an 80 or 75% grade, so it's very, very steep. Everything has to be done with trekkers, the tractors that are on tracks, and no wheel tractors allowed up there because we've had some issues up there. But it's great because I get to farm this particular vineyard. We do a lot of contracting by the acre, so I farm this vineyard how I want it to my own specificities. So generally, it's cropped around 2 to 3 tons an acre at the max. We do significant leaf pulling and shoot thinning. We do at least 2 or 3 passes in the vineyard in the season, and that just ensures that we're getting optimum ripeness, conformity in the block. That's really important to me. Yeah, it's also, you know, part of the winemaking too. It's aged in smaller vats. I do it in small lots, 50% whole clusters, and you know, native yeast. It's about 30 days roughly on skins, and then aged for almost 1,000 days in barrel, because really a wine like this to bottle too young, it's just too aggressive. It's a very rich wine. It's very aggressive. And so it needs that extended barrel aging, almost 3 years in barrel. 50% new French oak from the Juppy region, very tight grained oak that helps to not extract too much oak too fast into the wine. It helps to extract over the time period that I want it to, which is about 30 to 36 months.
So there's no bottle aging. It's pretty much.
I bottle age it for about 3 months before I release it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it generally, everything's done. All the aging's done in the barrel. At that point, it's generally ready to go. I like to give it just a couple of months before I release it, just to kind of mellow out in the barrel, or excuse me, in the bottle. But yeah, so 3 months, you know, in bottle, 31 months in oak. Yeah, it's a 3-year process.
So I see it says cases produced 50 to club members only.
Yeah, this particular wine, it's smaller than normally. You know, typically in the past vintages, 18, for instance, was 150 cases. 17 was 100 cases. I blended quite a bit of this wine into our GSM, which is our August blend. And then I also blended some in with some Touriga for that vintage as well. So, you know, what was left for me, Syrah is really our flagship, so it has to be the best of the best. And so this was only a 2-barrel blend, and that's really what made the cut. So I have no problem cutting barrels off from a bottling if they just don't quite fit in. And I really wanted the oak to be at least in the 50% range, so that was important for me.
It's interesting you blended Syrah with Touriga. How is that?
You know, it's really, they're very similar, you know? Yeah, they're very similar. Touriga is a little different in that it's very dark. It's almost similar to the same color. It's actually from the same vineyard as well, the Glenrose vineyard. But the Touriga is mild, more mild than tannin than the Syrah can be. So they just seem to be a fit made for each other to me.
So how much percentage do you put of Syrah in it?
In that blend that I'm working on right now, that's about 50-50 I'm working on, but that could go 60-40, you know, we're kind of in that stage. So.
Okay, nice, great. There was something I overlooked asking Jake and Amy. Somewhere in your notes, it said Thomas Jefferson's favorite wine was Syrah. I'm sorry, just jumping back. I just hit me for a moment. Is that somewhere in your notes? And I think it was from Domaine Berrien, but Anyway, I don't know why it just jumped at me. Anyway, look in your notes if you sent me that.
Yeah, I'll take a gander, but
Oh, the Thomas Jefferson note?
Yeah.
Yeah, so actually, no, that's a historical fact that we were reading up. Thomas Jefferson was a big fan of Rhone varietals. He imported a lot of French Rhone into the United States, and he always did say Syrah was his favorite grape, which I thought was very interesting. He thought it was the most interesting of all the wines he was able to import.
it is a winemaker favorite.
Yep.
Right. No, I kind of jumped at me like, oh, okay, I got to check on that with you. Anyway, so yeah, so back to Zachary. I would like to taste your Touriga and Syrah blend next time when I see you or come over.
Anytime.
But this just shows an amazing amount of depth and complexity, and I think it was what 15%.
It's closer to 16. I think it's 15.75. Yeah,
it just drinks so smooth.
it is smooth. And I think that the interesting thing about the site is where a lot of times if you let Syrah on the wrong site sit and achieve this much ripeness, your pH levels can go through the roof sometimes. I'm fortunate enough here, I think with this pure chalk kind of limestone soil, heavy limestone. I mean, it's really is chalk. I'm not exaggerating when I say that. You walk up there and it's chalk.
Does it kind of crumble in your hands?
It'll crumble in your hands. Exactly. I sent some pictures of that with the terroir just literally in my hand crumbling. And so what happens when you have a really high pH soil like that, it produces wines and grapes that tend to be lower in pH. So the pH on this wine is 3.75. It's got a TA of 0.56, and it just is able to achieve ripeness, but still have balance. And that's the important part.
Yeah, it just is. Yeah, it's amazing to see the spectrum today from 12%. Kathy, I don't know what yours was. Oh, here. Yeah, at 14, that's 14, up to almost 16. But they just have such a diversity of Syrahs, and it's brilliant. I mean, the Michigan one is like old world, in color and in its taste and its profile. And then you go through this whole spectrum of wines.
Yeah,
and they're all different personalities, each one absolutely brilliant in its own character and expression. Yeah. Do we have any questions, Tony?
I'm here.
Yeah.
I'm here.
Do we have any questions? Because I know we're nearing 5.
We are. We do have one question. What is the learning curve been among your local customers? And we can base this among all the panelists. What has been the learning curve for your local customers, wine enthusiasts, in terms of Syrah or other Rhone varietals? But let's focus on Syrah. Has it taken a lot of education, convincing, or do they just kind of jump on board? And we'll let everybody kind of just jump in.
Well, the old joke around our place is that Syrah is the Rodney Dangerfield of wines. It just can't get no respect.
Oh no!
This is the wrong panel to say that in, because we're all talking.
Oh no!
But
really?
That is to say, of our wine club, we've got this devout wine club. It's 400 strong. Many of them have been with us for 10, 15 years plus. And we often do these vertical tastings, and they are just like fighting each other tooth and nail to get into our library, because once we got over that initial learning curve, it was small, but everyone seemed to love that big, heavy, savory aspect that followed in with this fruit, that the people just, when they come in, they've grown to love it. They've absolutely grown to love Syrah. It's a wine club favorite. It's a winemaker favorite. And I would say it was a small learning curve. It was a very small learning curve. And now we can't keep enough of it on the shelf.
I was going to say, you have them taste it and they're sold. But you have to get them to taste it. You've got to convince them.
How long did it take? How many years for them to?
We were the first winery within the state of Michigan to plant Syrah.
Really?
And I think it was maybe 5 years later.
Yeah.
There's 100 different farms that are all growing Syrah around us in varying amounts. So this learning
Our
curve.
pioneers.
Yeah, very short term in which people that would have never been exposed to this grape, if you're going through and you're buying your wine in the grocery store or a specialty wine shop, even, it's not one that leaps off. It's not one that everyone says, oh, I know Burgundy, I know Bordeaux, I've heard of Cab Sauv. But Syrah for us it's one that people have come in, they've tasted it, they've liked it, and it's been inspirational not only to the people that enjoy it for us, but to our neighbors around us in our very small and blossoming wine industry.
Interesting. And Zachary, we are here in Syrah country, right?
Yes, we are.
And you know it too, Natalie, being in the Central Coast. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, in Paso, in particular, the Paso Robles AVA, I think it's about 9 or 10% planted to Syrah. So, Cabernet is still king. We did have that stretch in the early 2000s, mid 2000s, whatever you want to call it, where I believe Syrah was the most widely planted for a period of time, varietal. And I do remember there being a time, at least in the wholesale market, when I was working at Adelaida, where it was like, please just call it anything but Syrah. Blend it with something, call it anything but Syrah, because there was such an abundance of it, because there was such a clinging on to this variety, because it does so well in so many different conditions. It's a hardy variety. It can stand up to a lot of things. And I think that, and Paso is no exception, obviously. And I think that on this panel in particular, you can see the wide range of, what any variety can do. But I think Syrah has a tendency to really express itself in a cool climate. It can be spicy. It can be so many different things that so many people would consider really good wine. And I think that's really the hallmark of a great variety for sure.
And I also think in Paso, the Syrah popularity was due to the Cab Syrah blend.
Yeah.
Which was really launched here, come to think of it.
Yeah, I mean, I think we were kind of taking an ode from the Australians a little bit and the Penfolds, but I think that those two grapes go really well together.
It's a great marriage. It'll never go into a divorce. It's a great marriage. It is a long-lasting marriage.
Yes, yeah, they just do well together for sure.
Yeah, meant for each other. Yeah.
Here in Santa Barbara County, I'm in Ventura County, but I get almost all of my grapes from Santa Barbara County, a little bit from just over the SLO County line. But, Pinot and Chardonnay are king here. But Syrah is planted closely after that. And it's just, you really have to be careful, because when you're sourcing fruit from Santa Barbara County, a couple of miles makes such a difference. Like, are you going Santa Rita Hills and getting that super cool climate, or are you going Happy Canyon and getting like hot? So, especially as a newer winemaker, I had to learn a lot, coming from Sicily and, learning different regions and areas. So I think Syrah definitely takes, olive wine takes a little bit of education. People think that they know one thing and they like one thing, and you give them another and they're like, oh, I like this. And it's a wonderful thing to see them light up and to kind of open their mind and their palate to something different and new.
Yeah, I would say in the Rogue Valley, most of our customers are familiar with Syrah, and the challenge is the other Rhone varietals that they're less familiar with. Things like Mourvedre and things like Carignan have been, the aha moment for them, where Syrah is something that they can pronounce and something they've seen elsewhere. So that's, it's a lead in, if you will.
That you said the right word, pronounce. That means a lot, to the popularity of a wine. It's a pronunciation. That's so true. Yep. Yeah. Well, thank you all. Are we getting to close time, Tony? Yeah. Well, I thank you all so much, and thanks, Tony, for helping me moderate. So enjoyed meeting all of you, and thanks for all the wines. And it was just a wonderful experience for me, especially with Michigan. So thank you, Amy, Natalie, Kathy, Zachary, and Tony, and Craig. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank
you
you,
all.
Mira.
Hope to see you. And I will stop by and see you, Natalie, on my way to Ventura next time.
That'd be lovely. Yeah, we'd love to have you.
And I would love to make a trip to Michigan one of these days for sure.
Oh,
And-
please do, but wait till
Yeah.
spring.
Oh, yes, I'm not coming at 20 degrees. Oh, no. And I'm, Kathy, I'm coming to Oregon sometime early next year, going to Willamette, but of course we'll pass through Ashland and all, so I'll give you a call and I'd love to meet you.
Absolutely.
And you too, Craig, love to meet you too. Okay, all right.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks a
Thank
lot.
you.
Bye.
Cheers.